Life is no thrill compared to nil. Life is no thrill, it's worse than nil. So draw the right conclusion, let them be still.
Welcome to episode number 87 of the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, a podcast showcasing the wide range of perspectives and ideas throughout antinatalism as it exists today, through interviews with anti-natalist and non-antinatalist thinkers and creators of all kinds, now running 5 years strong. I'm your host, Amanda Sukenick, and today I'm speaking with freelance journalist and author of the recent Harper's Magazine article called The Case Against Children Among the Anti-natalists, Elizabeth Barber. Elizabeth, welcome to the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast. It's an honor to have you on the show today.
Thanks.
Just so everyone knows, this is just going to be a short little episode. As I'm sure many of you know, hopefully, Elizabeth here wrote a wonderful article for Harper's Magazine called The Case Against Children Among the Antinatalists, in which Mati Haire, David Benatar, the wonderful Kansu Ozge Osman, Stop Having Kids, and many other antinatalists and I were included and a big part of. Mati and I in particular worked with Elizabeth over the course of many months, and I'm so proud of the way that article ended up coming out, and I just thought it'd be really nice to sit down with Elizabeth and have a little recap about the whole experience. So Elizabeth, you are of course a very seasoned journalist. You've written all kinds of publications such as The New Yorker, The Point. But in your own words, who is Elizabeth Barber?
Well, I don't know about seasoned, but yeah, I am exactly as you describe. I'm a freelance journalist. I live in the Midwest, not so far from you, out in Iowa. I have basically never really had a beat in for a long time. That really thing they're known for. They cover climate change or they cover AI, something like that. And I've written about anti-natalist and nuns and veganism and motherhood and hotness. I don't really have a beat, but I've decided I had to describe myself. I've lately been saying that I write about the distance between the things that we wished that we wanted and what we actually want, and anti-natalism, veganism, all these things that people wished that they wanted for themselves or wish that they could call upon a higher principle for themselves, but actually they want something else entirely. And the embarrassment between that gap is interesting to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating for a variety of reasons. I mean, it's fascinating to hear you say that you don't feel like you have a beat from which you write from, but also fascinating to hear that you kind of are starting to feel like you're finding that. I mean, from my perspective of your work, it does because but when we started working together, I had read your article about veganism, and to me, and I'm sure for based on what you know about antinatalism now, those two subjects are peanut butter and jelly. I mean, they go together so perfectly. So it's always felt to me like there's a real consistency in your work. But it's fascinating for me to sort of learn more about your feelings behind it and the thesis that you feel is tying all of those things together.
Thanks.
Yeah. Elizabeth, why are you or are you not an antinatalist?
Yeah, so I'm not an antinatalist, which was interesting and very meaningful to me that you were willing to work with me so closely as someone who sort of, I think, openly did not identify as an antinatalist. I guess antinatalism definitely did this whole process and experience of going so deep into this definitely challenged me a lot to think about the narratives around childbearing and pregnancy and biological relationships, and to think a lot more about the responsibility of creating a person in more than just an idle way. And I think often we do think about that responsibility in a pretty idle way. I think In the piece, one thing I wish I had covered more or understood more is conversion narratives within antinatalism. I think a lot of the people I talked to had early on, even if at some point they decided they wanted children briefly or sort of wondered at the beauty of having a child. People I talked to, if not everyone, had always had a sense that they didn't really want to have a child. And I think in retrospect, I've become interested in the question of conversion, of how do you take someone that has no suspicions that having a child might be unethical, that is actually completely moved by the idea that the way to love the world is to add a child to it. How do you take that person as an adult and bring them into antinatalism? I think is maybe the challenge that you're facing too, and that you're thinking about all the time, about how to convert someone from completely opposed to where you are, just not at all in that world, and who has never thought about that world, as someone that is thinking about that world. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
100%. It absolutely does. And yeah, I mean, that's why people like Mati and I are always trying to kind of come up with new arguments. And I mean, one of the thing that I have one of the reasons I have such great respect for you and for the way the article came out is because, even though I would have loved to have convinced you, I have so much respect to. It's very rare to find somebody that's willing to do all this inquiry, to challenge themselves with these ideas. I mean, that's just not something that you find very often. So I think you really should be applauded for, standing up, putting yourself in that line of fire, so to speak. Whether and just facing that anti-procreative music, no, wherever it may take you. But I mean, it would have been very interesting to see you further explore, sorry, the conversion narratives, as you were saying. But I also, if you don't mind me saying, I feel like you kind of hit the gold mine on that by finding Jansu, because she is an antinatalist, an antinatalist woman, no less, that wanted children and still continues to say that she wants that, but has made that ethical decision. And I knew so little about her before. I knew of her, but I didn't know she was an antinatalist before the article, and she's since been on the podcast. And so I just wanted to say that I think that would have been definitely interesting to explore from each of us. And I think you and I and Mati got to a little bit about that in the document, the massive document that we created. Each of our sort of where we were coming from, on the subject of procreation from
Yeah,
time we were young.
I was definitely in pursuit of people for whom antinatalism did not sort of confirm and clarify suspicions
Yeah,
they had since they were a child, but who had been completely turned around by
yeah,
this idea in the same way a reader might be.
yeah.
Possible.
Yeah. So again, I think Jansu was, definitely the gold mine. Finding her and her story on that was a revelation for me as well. How did the idea for your article originally come about, and can you describe for us the process of finding everyone you spoke to, and just what the general process of writing this thing was like?
Yeah. I developed this piece with my editor right after the vegan piece came out. I wrote about animal rights activism in Harper's a couple of years ago. And obviously, maybe not obviously, but obviously to you probably, it had come up in that reporting that the problem of animal suffering might be preceded by the problem of humanity's continuation and continuing to prey upon animals by fact of humans continuing to exist and to multiply. So I think I brought this up with my editor. He co-signed it. It then took me like a good 6 months, maybe more, a year, to do anything about it. I think I was really stalled out on the idea that antinatalism seemed to exist as an idea, as a philosophy, that I wasn't sure how to make it move, how to get people to care. The animal rights piece succeeded for me, I think, because it had some one person that you could care about and who cared so much about something that it was possible to care about the issue because you could care about him. So I think it wasn't maybe until I started finding anti-natalist activism, which I did not know existed prior. At the time I pitched this, I did not know that there were anti-natalist activists. Stop Having Kids is out in the you yourself are constantly doing activism. This podcast is activism, and I think at that point I became more confident in really pursuing this piece, that I could give a reader someone to care about and who cared passionately about a cause and could sort of animate and make this piece move. So
You kind of hit everything at like a perfect time too, because as you well know now, antinatalist activism is pretty young. Had you tried to write this article even 3, 4, 5 years ago, you would have found me, but you might, Stop Having Kids wasn't around. I mean, there wasn't as much happening. So I think everything kind of came together at the perfect time, I think. So thank you
yeah.
so much for that. Yeah, it's fascinating. Together with the wonderful Mati, the three of us wrote this massive document where you asked us all kinds of questions, and then he and I each wrote our answers. This was an incredible experience for me. It really was. And so much amazing material came out of that writing. It's sort of a book all its own, and it's something I kind of hope something can be done with in the future. I don't know what, but there's so much great stuff in there. This document incidentally played a huge role in the development of Anti-natalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self-Corruption, my new book with Mati Haire. You do speak a little bit about this document in the Harper's article itself, but I was just curious if there was anything special you remember from writing that document, or anything at all you want to tell the audience about it.
There was more of it in the piece. If there was like infinite choice of what to draw from to put in the article, or which conversations the three of us had to highlight or not highlight, sort of happenstance what I ended up highlighting. It could have been anything. I think I just remember the generosity of your two's responses. I think people don't always have patience for journalists asking dumb questions, basic questions, uneducated questions. And I think as I got slightly more sophisticated as the document went on, I think it's like 30,000 words or something. So eventually I got a little smarter, but not that much smarter. I really appreciated that you didn't challenged or questioned. I think my sense of the antinatalist community is that you are challenged all the time. You are quite used to it, to being asked to defend your position.
Yeah,
Just
100%. You cut out a little bit. I'm so
oh,
sorry.
you're fine. Just more than anything, just the generosity of your time on that document. I mean, that's very rare for someone to be willing to, donate that much of their time to a journalist. So I'm really grateful for that.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. And you happen to find two people in the world that are only too happy to talk about antinatalism endlessly and answer any and all questions someone might have about it. So, if I may so boldly speak for Mati as well, we both really loved doing that with you. And yeah, in a sense, we sort of wrote two books last year, because that document was just about the length of the new book, so it's kind of funny. So, but yeah, thank you for all your generosity and for your interest. I mean, it was a really fun time for me, I have to say. What was the response? What has the response to the article been like? Did you receive any feedback from the anti-natalist community? What did people outside of the AN community have to say about it? What has happened since the release of the article?
Yeah. Well, I was really nervous out because I thought the anti-natalist community would be mad at me. Because I don't end up as an anti-natalist at the end. And, there is some push and pull, and I'm sure that there are issues in the piece that, I don't know, and antinatalists might not have been thrilled with how I presented things or how I framed things. So I was really nervous. But from what I can tell, I haven't really heard directly from the antinatalist community because I'm not involved in that community, I think. But from what I can tell, it's gone okay. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of subjects in the piece that aren't antinatalism. It's also about stepmotherhood. It's also about a miscarriage. And I think I've also just gotten a lot of feedback on those elements from people who have experienced miscarriage and don't always see that represented in long form magazine articles. And yeah, commiseration or just reaching out with their stories of having difficult experiences in pregnancy. So it's been a good response. I've been happy with it.
Good. I'm delighted to hear that. Well, I mean, it doesn't, I think that what you're saying highlights, I think, an important issue is that, I mean, there's even outside of antinatalism, there's so many subjects within the subject of procreation that just don't get talked about enough. I mean, and so I'm glad that antinatalism could be a huge part of that with this article. But speaking of generosity, I mean, your extraordinarily candid sharing of your own experience was a tremendous part of this piece, and it could not have been. However I feel about the subject of procreation, I mean, it could not have been easy to go through what you've been through and share it in such a public way. So, thank you for putting all of that out there. And again, I mean, taking all of that and then exposing yourself to anti-natalists, that takes a lot of, it really does, though. It takes a lot of bravery and courage. So, again, I applaud you for that tremendously. Elizabeth, I just want to say that, I really am so proud to have been included in the article and how much I sincerely enjoyed meeting you and working with you over so much of 2023. I will never forget our time at the Field Museum. It was really the whole thing was really a very transformative experience for me on a lot of levels. Thank you so much for that. And, I truly wish you nothing but the best. I can't wait to see what other articles you are working on subsequently. Can you tell us anything about what you're working on now, what the future holds for Elizabeth Barber?
I've just been pitching things lately. We'll see what actually gets a contract and what doesn't. So we will find out, but all more to do with the distance between wanting and wanting to want. So yeah.
Wonderful. I'll be keeping my fingers crossed. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for being my guest today on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. I'm just so glad we could get a little, after the fact recap of the experience of writing this article. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. And so you've arrived. Welcome to Anti-Procreate, the finest anti-procreatory in the world. Sir, Madame, I will be your waiter today, and it is my great pleasure to serve you both. Would you both perhaps like to start off by seeing a copy of our menu? Perhaps you'd like to hear about our specials tonight? Excellent. Tonight we are serving an experience. Blue and green button surprise. This delicious anthropocentric delight, when pressed together, will produce irreversible collective infertility of humankind, as well as mankind making room for other species to inherit the earth after our demise. The aroma! Here, on the house. Bon appetit. Yes, that's right, sir. The buttons pressed just like that is really what brings out the flavor. Well, perhaps I'll give you folks a little more time with your Oh, you'd like to know what this menu item is? Well, actually, this is from our secret menu. We're generally not allowed to talk about this menu item. It happens to be an old favorite of mine. What's this? Oh, you'd like to speak to our chefs about it, to learn more. And what did you say? Oh, and you've heard about our party on May 15th in the Grand Anti-Procreate or Grand Dining Hall. Well, actually, it just so happens that you're both invited. And so are you. Your invitations are in your menus. Let's learn all about it. Mati Haira and Amanda Sukenick welcome you to our grand launch event for our book, Anti-natalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self-Corruption on May 15th. Featuring Lawrence Anton, the cosmic anti-natalist, Tejas, anti-natalist philosopher and historian, Karima Kurma, anti-natalist philosopher, Patricia McCormack, art, music, a giveaway contest, and more! Don't forget that you can read Anti-natalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self-Corruption right now for free on the Cambridge.org website. Physical copies of the book can also be purchased in both hardcover and paperback, links below. Thank you again for dining at Anti-Procreator. Please do come again, and see you on the 15th. I know you guys don't want me to press it, but you didn't say anything about eating it. Hey everybody, it's Amanda. Are you looking for an excellent way of making academic antinatalist works more available across the globe? I know I am. And so I'm delighted to announce that the wonderful and award-winning Polish publishing house,
Towarzystwo Naukowe imienia Stanisława Andreskiego,
which over the last 2 years has produced some exceptionally beautiful Polish editions of both original works like
Antinatalism
by
Mikołaj Starzyński,
as well as classic academic antinatalist works like David Benatar's Better Never to Have Been, has now opened an online shop featuring the magnificent antinatalist Ouroboros designed by
Michał Dziadkowiec.
The logo is fully customizable and available on a wide variety of products. Proceeds from all sales at the shop go directly towards the translation, production, and publication of more Polish editions by
Towarzystwo Naukowe imienia Stanisława Andreskiego.
What a perfect way for the antinatalist community to help assist an amazing company doing such important work, making more antinatalist academic works more widely available. Link below.
Towarzystwo Naukowe imienia Stanisława Andreskiego.
Hi, my name is Nimrod, and about 10 months ago, I decided that I want to try and initiate grassroots anti-natalism activism in Israel, because this is where I was forced to be born. The activism is going better than I expected, so I thought that if it's working in a place like Israel, it sure can and should work around Europe. And besides, why should only people in Israel hear my nagging about reproduction?
כשאנחנו מולידים מישהו, שאנחנו עושים ילד, מה שאנשים קוראים, אין לנו שום דרך לשלוט בזה שהחיים שלו יהיו טובים, ושהוא ימצא את החיים שלו ראויים כשהוא יהיה גדול, או דברים רואים יכולים לקרות בכל רגע נתון. ההחלטה הכי קריטית בחיים של מישהו, לא הוא קיבל. No, but it's not about balance, it's about suffering. Why should anyone suffer? את יכולה לחוות הורות בלי ליצור בן אדם חדש, לאמץ. שזה פתרון מדהים בעיניי, מאוד יפה מוסרית. I'm not playing God. People who procreate play God. They create new life. I don't create new life. I'm standing here with signs. People are creating new life, and they are creating a new victimizer, someone who would cause suffering to others. 10 אנשים נולדים, 9 יהיו מאושרים, 1 יהיה אומלל, אבל כל 10 לא יסבלו מזה שהם לא יהיו קיימים. כי הם לא קיימים. יפה. אז בשביל האחד הזה שיהיה אומלל, לא שווה שה9 יהיו קיימים.
Therefore, from the 15th of April and until the end of May, I will be going around Europe to talk to people about reproduction, spreading the word about antinatalism. Madrid, Barcelona, Paris, Brussels, Vienna, Prague, Berlin, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Budapest, Rome. And all in all, I will be visiting more than 30 cities in 45 days, starting from the 15th of April until the end of May. The goal of this journey is to try and initiate some anti-natalism grassroots activism in Europe. So I really hope that as many anti-natalists as possible would join me to these outreach events. If you are passionate about anti-natalism and I'm coming to your city, please join me. Together, we'll spread the word and normalize anti-natalism.
Hi,
My name is Nimrod, and I'm going to Europe to make it anti-natalist. Well, probably not, but I am going to Europe, and I am going to talk to people about anti-natalism. They will decide, hopefully for the best.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi everyone. About 10 months ago, I started doing street anti-natalism activism in an attempt to establish an anti-natalist movement in Israel. I had many concerns for the obvious reasons when it comes to such a topic, and also due to the fact that Israel is not the ideal place, not the place I would choose to start if I could choose. But here is where I was unfortunate enough to be born in, and the familiarity with the culture and society and the fact that Hebrew is my native language made me decide to start here anyway. However, to my surprise, it's going better than I thought. And that is despite that, as you probably know, it was very complicated to do any kind of activism in Israel in the past year.
A peace protest to cease fire in Israel. It's a normal evening in Israel in more than a year now. Yeah, bring down the government. Yeah, I know. Bringing down the government won't solve problems. Only anti-natalism will. But we still really need to bring down the government here.
This experience made me believe and hope that if in a place like Israel there is room for street activism on such an issue, even though it's not the ideal place to spread messages about reproduction, there's certainly potential for anti-natalism activism in many areas of Europe. That's why I decided to go on a journey to try and promote anti-natalism activism throughout Europe. The journey will start on the 15th of April and will include more than 30 cities in 45 days. The goal of this journey is to try and initiate grassroots activism in Europe. So obviously the best thing I'm hoping for is that people would simply join me to the outreach events. This is literally the whole point of the journey, to try and help initiating some street activism, people spreading antinatalism all across the continent on a regular basis. If you want to help but you are embarrassed or feel uneasy to speak with people about such an issue on the street in an outreach event, my advice is the same advice that I gave to people in Israel who were interested in joining me to the outreach events, and that is to come along, to kind of stand aside, at least at first, to listen and try to figure out how you feel about talking to people about such an issue on the street. Everyone who have joined me in the outreach events in Israel at some point felt comfortable enough to talk to people, and at some point after starting to talk to people, they felt it came quite natural to them. So there is no reason why this won't be your case as well. So please try it. Please come and join me. And you can really help even if you really don't want to talk to people, which I get. For example, by filming some of the conversations. I'm planning to take a tripod and a remote control to operate the phone so I can film some of the conversations once they're starting. But obviously there is no substitute for someone standing and filming with a camera or a phone some of the conversations. I'm sure that we'll get much better filming of the conversations if someone will do it. That would be much more efficient. And it can also be a much more efficient way for you to kind of test if you want to talk to people about procreation on the street in an outreach event by starting behind the camera and trying to figure out if you want to stand, so to speak, in front of the camera. So another reason to come to the outreach events. Another excellent way for locals to help, as those who know the cities the best, even without coming to the outreach events themselves, is directing me to the best locations you think this kind of activity could be performed. My intuition goes for university campuses in the mornings and afternoons, and squares and entertainment areas where people hang out in the evenings. But tips from locals would be the best because you know your cities and I don't. So please feel free to contact me or comment to this video. That will be very helpful. Another way to help, if you can, is support. So far, the expenses of my activities in Israel have been quite low. It mostly required some office equipment, such as brushes and paints and markers and stuff like that to make the signs. and some price of travel to move to the location of the events. But the case of the journey is very, very different, obviously. It's a 45 days journey, which includes more than 30 cities. So despite that I will be sleeping in the cheapest hotels I could find, and that my bar is very low and in terms of daily expenses, and food and stuff like that, and that I will be traveling by bus and by buses and trains only, still the expenses are very, very high. So in the case of the journey, I do have to ask anyone who supports this cause, who supports the idea of this journey, to contribute something. So I did place a donation button in the website. So if you can, please contribute something to the cause. Speaking of support, obviously the best thing you can do if you want to help is join me to the outreach events. This is literally the whole point of the journey. But if you can't for some reason, because you don't want to be open with your worldview at this particular time, because it doesn't work out your schedule, whatever reason you have, and you still want to help, and you can't help financially, because whatever reason you have, you can still be very, very helpful if you host me for the night. Not only that this will cut expenses quite significantly, it will be very, very nice to spend an evening instead of in a hostel with a like-minded person. So for me, it's a win-win. So I would really appreciate anyone who can just host me for a night on your couch and feed me. In the details of this video, you can find the planned journey routes. And I also put a link to a WhatsApp group dedicated to the journey, where you can make suggestions on locations, give tips on where I can find cheap vegan food, where I will be able to update on locations in real time, and of course, and most importantly, where we can schedule in any of the cities where to meet if you want to join the outreach events themselves. Well, that's it for now. Thank you for listening, and I really look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully meet you in person. Hey crew, do we have it? Just kidding. I'm all alone here.
Thank you for listening to the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast. Please follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Exploring Antinatalism can also be heard on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Amazon.com, and so many other platforms. You can email me at exploringantinatalism@gmail.com. Website designed by Visions Noirs. Please follow him at www.bionoir.com and follow him on Instagram. Logo art by Life Sucks. Please subscribe to him on YouTube and check out his shop on Etsy at www.etsy.com/shop/LifeSucksPublishing. Music by Mati Hairi. You can hear the whole song, Life is a Sexually Transmitted Disease with a Mortality Rate of 100%, by following the link in the description, and make sure to also read his academic paper which inspired the song, If You Must Give Them a Gift, Then Give Them the Gift of Non-Existence, in the Cambridge Quarterly of Healthcare Ethics on cambridge.org. Links below. All the best, and bye for now.
Life is no thrill compared to nil. Life is no thrill, it's worse than nil. So draw the right conclusion, let them be still.